Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Okay, welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Today, I have a return special local guest, Eric Burtzlaff. Eric is the principal and lead engineer at Raptor Civil Engineering, LLC. Eric founded Raptor in 2020 with a vision for a different type of civil engineering firm built on the pillars of communication and expertise. Eric has worked in the greater Denver area for 10 years and has overseen 200 plus projects, probably even more since we last spoke with him. Along the Front Range, Eric has always had a passion for customer service and takes deep pride in his work. Eric, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. And yeah, you're absolutely right. That is now outdated. I want to say that's like, I have 12 years of experience. And yeah, now it's like, I don't know, like many more hundreds of projects, I suppose. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know it has been amazing. So we follow each other on LinkedIn, and I'm always looking at your guys' posts, and you're very active on there. And it looks like you've just been experiencing more amazing growth and well-deserved because as everybody knows who's listened to the show for a while, you guys are somebody that we work with all the time. So how much have you grown since we last spoke? We talked about the same time last year. Yeah.
So in a year, I will say, so this is August now. Yeah. So we have grown from about, well, I think we would have been 3 at that time, and we are bringing on our 7th and 8th in the next month here. So we've got a new employee starting on Monday, and then another new employee starting in a couple of weeks. So we're very excited to continue to grow and kind of, I guess, like continue to serve the growing need for small and middle development on the Front Range here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of growth.
It is. Trust me, I know. I'm aware of that.
Yeah, it makes me feel, it makes me nervous just hearing that much because, you know, one of there's a mentor we have who said, you should be doing like 1 a year. 1 a year is a good one, and you got to be really selective about who you pick. So tell me about everybody else. Like, what's been the key for hiring the right people at Raptor? What's your process? Have you learned any lessons?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say it has not been without some hiccups. Like we swelled up to 6, then back to 4. And then we're hiring again to go up. So it has not been as seemingly smooth as unbelievable as it may be as far as hiring within 1 year's time has been, that it has come with a bit of headaches. But my philosophy with hiring has always been just getting the right fit personality wise for your firm. Is I have all the confidence in the world in our firm's ability to train engineers coming in and make sure that engineers are good fits for our system. So that's, if they share a similar passion for civil engineering, and I'll say the number of civil engineers who will interview who don't seem to like civil engineering, and especially experienced ones, don't seem to have a passion for it, have more of like a job mentality, huge red flag from our end. So,
how do you pull that out of people? How do you find that out?
It really is. I mean, you can just sense it on somebody. If they're in there just humdrumming in the interview, and you're one of 7 of their interviews that they're just out there looking for a pay raise, it becomes apparently obvious, especially at the startup nature of this firm. It's exciting. Like, we've grown a lot. And if you're not excited about joining a firm that frankly, day to day, you can be part of something that you can visibly see grow, that's something that it's contagious in the interview, and you can sense that. But I generally, when we're interviewing, try to keep our interview candidates a little bit off guard, because I just come in really friendly, really casual, which I think is consistent with who we are and who I am. But at the same time, it takes you're in a suit and tie expecting to be asked about like the 4 things you'd bring to an island, and we're sitting here, just casually shooting the S. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse here, but yeah, we're just casually shooting, and you actually do when you kind of just have a more casual conversation, you are able to get responses. Like, we had an interview. And I asked we're just having a casual conversation. I'm like, do you view this as more of a stepping stone, or is this like what your career passion is? And just without even thinking, stepping stone for sure. And I'm like,
oh my gosh,
landmine, gotcha.
Well, do you think I mean, that's interesting. So I asked you how you were able to pull that out of people, and it sounds like it's, if you approach it from a casual standpoint, you can almost get them to do some Freudian slips.
Well, more just like tell you the truth, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not giving it to them in that very pointed question answer approach. You're having a conversation, and it's a lot more difficult to not be yourself in a conversation versus, please tell me about this. Very interesting. And then I take notes, look back up at you and say, ooh, what about this? And then you answer, I take notes, look back at you. It's a lot easier to keep your composure in that sense. And the intent's not to get them to like incriminate themselves and not get the job, but at the same time, it's to understand how they are conversationally, and a lot of times that's who they are as a person.
Yeah, we it's so interesting. It's such an interesting little story. We had somebody do the same thing, not the same thing, something similar once, and they came in and they said, oh, I want to be sitting where you're sitting, and I'm like, oh, you can't do the movie, like you're doing the movie answer to that, and like that's not actually what I want to hear at all. Tell us about some mistakes. That's my favorite part about interviewing folks, is I want to hear what the mistakes were so that maybe people can avoid those in the future.
As far as like in hiring, or just generally in the firm as we grow?
No, in the hiring. Yeah, specifically in hiring.
I'd say like I had a vision for, and my wife and I talked about it, is like one of our big things is like quality control. And it's something in the industry that I think is really lacking, especially as you grow, being able to keep your quality control. And so it was something I wanted to invest in early. And I think I got too cute. I brought in a great engineer, and he was employee number like 6. And I'm like, here's what you'll do. You'll be a project engineer for 3-4 years while we're growing. You'll help grow the team as we grow, and you'll be able to train, and like that'll be your role that you'll transition into. Well, turns out 3 years is a really long time. And so like basically he came in with this excitement of like, I'm going to be training, I'm going to be hiring. And he's like, like in the interview, it sounded fine. Like, we'll wait a couple of years, that as we grow, it'll be a slow burn and I'll do my previous job. Well, it turns out that that's not really what we hired. It's not really what he was excited about. And so it was definitely a case of trying to get a little bit too cute with hiring and not filling the direct need we need. And I do think that a direct need we have is, as we scale, I'm one human being who can't oversee 8 people working at one time. So we have to have quality control in place. But at the same time, like having a streamlined pipeline of young engineers being trained up properly probably shouldn't happen until we're, I don't know, another 10 to 20 employees. And there really is just like a constant ecosystem with hiring. But that would be the most like obvious one, I would say. And then also just holding on to employees that aren't good fits for too long. I think that's a really common one, where as an owner, you feel guilty about like, well, they're one of my few employees. I brought them in, they took a leap with me, and then they're just not a fit. And that was the other, I'd say, mistake. As we were trying to grow, ultimately we held on to an employee probably 2 months too long, which isn't catastrophic. I've heard stories of holding on to people for far longer than that, but trying to keep a mentality of making sure that who you have on your team is the right fit. Because as you grow here, having one person that's not the right fit can really create a cultural shift that you don't want to happen. That can be a systemic cultural shift this young into a firm.
Yeah, and it's so important. I mean, as you know, culture is absolutely. So tell us about that. Tell us about your company culture. Tell us about Raptor Day. What is Raptor Day?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like we try to keep things casual. So when I opened Raptor, I wanted to come up with some fun things. Like I just thought like there's so much to be explored in like company benefits. And we wanted to provide a pretty good benefits package. And one of the things that, as I was shooting it with my wife, who tends to be my counterpart on this, is I was like, well, like, what about if we like have a Founders Day? She's like, what if you give everybody the day off? And I'm like, what if we call it Raptor Day? So on the first Monday of August, which is basically the founding day, we've done it twice now because we're only 2 years old, is we give the entire firm the day off. We go play Top Golf we've done it the last 2 years. We played Top Golf the Sunday before. Everybody has drinks. Significant others are really encouraged to come. It's a day where like we just celebrate. And the way I frame it is, personally, the way I look at that day is to celebrate the successes of the year and then look forward to the year ahead. And I think that that's something, as having been in the industry for 12 years now, as you said, is those years flip by for the most part, and you don't take time you don't benchmark those appropriately. At least I didn't personally. And so it's really like kind of a forced benchmark. And also it's like almost like a happy Raptor birthday, like taking that time off. But yeah, so I think that's unique. I've actually had other business owners reach out when they saw that and be like, that's genius. And then some of them being like, well, you can't undo that, you know? And I'm like, yeah, no, I understand that's the case, is that's now an extra day off. But let's talk about, you asked about culture. So culture is, we are trying to keep a pretty light culture, but also a culture of excellence, both being responsive to clients as well as high quality plans. And then with that, we've got some like fun things where we don't, like, our dress codes are pretty casual. Our time in the office is 9 to 5. Actually, we make a point of not allowing really our employees to work greater than 40 hours, even though they're salary. A lot of firms have the opposite approach to that.
Right.
And I just kind of firmly believe that burnout's a real thing. And if you force somebody to work 60 hours, it's just a matter of time till great employees walk out the door. And if you do it right, if you're properly organized, you can be profitable, very profitable, having employees work at 40 hours a week. I find that poor project management, in my experiences, has generally led to, we have to deal with this fire, which leads to another 20 hours of work. And so like our Fridays are super fun. That's probably the way I'd put the cultural question to like the test there. Is like, the other day our employees, unknown to me, had Country Friday, and everybody showed up in boots and
I love it.
And
I love
awesome.
that so much.
And then like we started a tradition with our third employee. He loves Raising Cane's chicken tenders.
Yeah.
And we every Friday go out to Raising Cane's, and now we used to all fit in the car, pile and go. Now that we're 8, obviously we have somebody run up and grab it, but we've continued that. Like, the company pays for that, and it's a lot of fun. Everybody looks forward to that. So we've got things like that are culturally a lot of fun, that feel very different than like a typical civil engineering firm, I'd say.
Yeah, in your experience, and without naming names, obviously, in like the other firms you worked for, I mean, was there anything even close to what you're describing?
I do. Yeah, there were actually, to give credit to like my previous employer, they were really good at like providing these things. It was just, the problem was they weren't always convenient, where we would have days where like you would shut down on Friday, and all the staff are like, but you didn't, like, we have all these deadlines on Friday. So you'd have like this office party happening with people like with their headphones on grinding. And I'm like, that feels bad. So like trying to thread the needle of providing a fun culture while not, like it feels bad to be working your ass off and have 4 of your coworkers next to you playing ping pong for an hour, right? Like, that feels pretty bad. So it's definitely threading the needle of like fun without necessarily creating a situation where your excellent employees feel like they're being taken advantage of.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's spot on.
But I do think that right now, like the cultural, like every firm is trying to have like work-life balance and like a cool culture. And I think we do a really good job of pulling that off. But I think those are buzzwords right now that are everywhere in these interviews. And like, I think that these candidates show up to these jobs like day 2 and they're like, this is not what I was told. Or it's far more chaotic than it was led on to believe.
Yeah. Everybody's got their own opinion exactly about how fun it is or not. I think depending on the staff level and everything, that's a great point.
Yep.
What do you guys think you guys are doing right and other civil engineers are doing wrong? I mean, you joked before we came on air here that, oh man, I haven't talked to you forever. We talked, I think, twice yesterday. And before that, 3 times, because we have so many projects with you guys right now. I'm hearing from the development side, obviously, that they say, well, Eric picks up the phone. And then that's my same thing too, is I say, well, Eric picks up the phone. I mean, it's just and everybody, I mean, and when I say Eric, I'm kind of using it in the plurality of your entire staff, but that's my perspective of what you guys are doing right, is you're just simple picking up the phone almost immediately. What do you guys think? What do you think you're doing right?
I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. I think I think being personable, and I did have, and I mentioned it early in the interview here, is I had an architect tell me that he felt like out of all the civil engineers he works with, that other civil engineers seem burned out and they don't seem they seem like they're just day-to-day chugging along, and they don't actually seem, and what he said to me that stood out, and I've been kind of like exploring the thought, is like, it doesn't seem like they actually enjoy being civil engineers anymore. And it seems like the passion for actually good design has kind of been lost into into burnout or into whatever it may be after 10, 12 years of business. And maybe we'll get there. I'm hopeful not. But I do think the communication is huge. And I'll say, like, last time I was on the pod, I was like, we respond within 24 hours. I pick up the phone immediately. I do this. And I'm like, yeah, as we're getting to 8 employees and like 200 jobs a year, it's not going to be as fast now. And like, it's definitely gotten to the point where like responding within 24 hours has become kind of the norm of what's possible. Respond when I can, but still within 24 hours. But it's something that making sure that you're not running away from communication, because I do think that the instinct sometimes is to say, oh, I just can't do this right now, I'm not going to pick up the phone, and then that turns into a voicemail that turns into you calling them back, it turns into them calling you back, it turns into you calling them back, and you just wasted a lot more time, 3 times the amount of time, than if you just pick up the phone, had the conversation, typed up the quick email, sent it out. And then not on top of that, not only did you save yourself time, you also managed to actually make the client happy. And for the most part, if you can get a contract into a client's hand and you talk to them quickly, many times you end up with a signed contract like immediately. It's like we moved our contracts over to DocuSign, and that's like so easy that they can do it from their phone, that if they're feeling good in that moment, like you end up with a signed contract within like 45 minutes of sending it off, which has just been awesome. And I think that that's another really important thing, and it's been a huge part of our success as well. On top of obviously being able to back it up with an awesome product and awesome communication, and knowing all of the experience we have with all these jurisdictions on small infill stuff, is I've probably got an example for every project type that somebody out there on the Front Range is thinking of doing. Like one of our projects that we had, like I think that the developer very quickly realized like, oh wow, they've actually like done this exact project before. And that's a good feeling for a developer. And that's when they have their next project, they pick up the phone and they're like, do you have, and we answer it obviously. And then we likely have some type of example from there too.
Do you think that's your specialty at this point? The smaller little infill stuff, the hard to do?
Certainly that's the bread and butter we have right now. And I don't know, like I always, calling it smaller stuff is we do and granted, like our specialty is probably projects under, well, I'd say like the majority of our work is under an acre, with the vast majority of our work being under 5 acres of total development. That is certainly our bread and butter right now. I don't know that we'll stay there forever. I think as we continue to grow, there's a natural evolution that occurs there. But it's been something that we are very, very good at. I don't think there's anybody right now doing as many SDPs in the city of Denver, for example. I had one of the city engineers at Lakewood tell me I must be the single greatest salesperson because we're on every project. Like that we have these, that's a true story for sure, apparently. In the back, in the wings, they keep laughing that we're on everything. But yeah, that project type specifically in the Denver market is a really popular type, because the way that the lots are broken out, they're not huge, complicated pieces to take down. They're almost like developer light to some extent, where you can be an inexperienced developer. The buy-in is low enough to where you don't have to have a $40 million group behind you to purchase the land and pull the trigger on a huge conglomerate, like huge set of buildings and things like that. Like I'm thinking about the DC area, for example. Like that's a great example of a very the buy-in to do development in the city of Washington, D.C. is significantly higher than that in Denver. And so we serve an awesome like niche within this community. I think that there are just not that many good civils that live in the space that we live in.
Yeah, it's a good spot to be in. I agree. And there's so much opportunity, like you said. I mean, we're working on a couple of those with you. Sales, you mentioned that, and that was going to be my next question before you even mentioned the word. Was a lot of it's word of mouth, right? But I mean, are you doing anything else to get the word out there, or is the work just speaking for itself at this point?
Certainly I would love to be doing a little bit more. We've done really good work on our website and our web presence. I think that you mentioned like LinkedIn being popular. Like I did have another civil engineer ask me like point blank, like, how are you, like, who's running that for you? I'm like, I'm doing that. He's like, how are you doing that? I'm like, it's in my free time. I'm, posting projects, pictures, updates, things like that from the company page. So I think the social media presence has been much better, I'd say, for recruiting staff than it has been for recruiting clients. I think that the website and the SEO associated with that, as well as the word of mouth, has been probably the biggest marketing item. And I'd say the fact that we may, and I think you can attest to this, the fact that we make architects' lives easier really gets a lot of architects ringing our phone saying, well, if Eric's on this project, I don't have to do this annoying thing that I don't like to do and I'm barely qualified to do. Yeah. And I trust Eric to be able to handle, or trust Raptor to be able to handle that client communication. And that's turned into a huge marketing thing where as soon we have architects who like we'll do one project with, developer will refer us, and they'll pick up the phone and go, well, I've got 3 more, like, can you help? And we're able to provide that. I think that's been another marketing thing. But I would love to, like, I don't know, like start focusing a little bit more on like different marketing types. But I think that right now, admittedly, we're very busy, and I don't think that we want to bite off more than we can chew, because hiring is not easy, as you probably know.
Yeah.
So we'll be, our growth has been high, but I think that the reason the growth seems so steep is because I should have opened this firm with 4 or 5 people. I think I vastly underestimated the demand that existed, and that as soon as I opened the door, the phone just kept ringing and ringing, and I was able to kind of, with the way these development projects go, it's like, you sign contracts 3-4 months before you're actually doing really heavy, work. And I'd say it was about 6 months before I hired my first employee. So, and then it was just constant from there. So I think I've been very cautious in the way we've grown. And with like the market showing signs of potentially, taking a downturn, we've been very, very cautious to make sure that our financials were in order, to make sure that we were comfortable with the workload we had, the diversity workload, and as well as the financials in the background.
Economy, you just kind of touched on that too. And that's always something, it seems like you and I talk about at least once a month when we have a conversation. It's we're, in my opinion, we're clearly in a recession, but it's a really weird recession. I've went over it a few times in a couple of recent episodes, talking about how it's like all of a sudden we have this inflation, but then we have this low employment rate. But then the GDP is technically going down. So like, are you cautiously optimistic? Are you just no opinion about it? But where do you feel like we're heading? And then also maybe if you could talk about, one of the things I try to stress is that we have a housing shortage in Colorado, and so it seems like no matter what there's a demand there, and so it's going to keep chugging along. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I mean, and this goes back to like my days. I was a professional poker player for several years, and I'm an eternal pessimist. And I, from that end of things, is like I'm constantly thinking about the worst possible range of outcomes and trying to set myself up to not implode from that. So since opening Raptor, I've been very thoughtful to the fact that a recession is looming. And now obviously we're in, I think by definition, a recession at this point. Whether or not that turns into a housing, 2008, where the whole housing market implodes. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen. It certainly could happen. But yeah, I mean, I really don't know. And I think that the way I've planned is to be as pessimistic as possible when I'm forecasting that, and then trying to make sure that I'm making decisions on spending, on hiring, on should we buy more hats, should we, to make these decisions on like overhead costs, or should we upgrade to a bigger office now that we have more people, like make decisions that are more on the cautious side of not going extravagant, because that you don't get that money back if the whole market collapses. That having some lifeblood in the business is critical. So my stance on that has been that approach. So basically what that's turned into is trying to put as much money into the company bank account as humanly possible, to make sure that if there is a downturn, that we're not, immediately laying off staff. And I think, as I say to my staff sometimes, I'm like, if we are in a spot for layoffs, the entire industry is going to be upside down by that point.
Right.
And so that's about as good as you can do, right? Is like, you can't forecast. If things get so bad that it's, 30% layoffs across the board, there may very well at some point be Raptor layoffs, but that the goal would be not to have that happen. And so that's where when I say I'm a pessimist, I'm prepared for that scenario, but I'm really prepared in the sense of I'm really hopeful that it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, I am too. Tell us what your short-term and long-term plans for Raptor. I would love to hear, especially about the long-term. I mean, the franchises or
franchises? No, I haven't thought about that before, actually. So I mean, short-term, it's my stance on this is like organic growth. I think sometimes, and I think that the organic growth, frankly, I missed the shot at the beginning of the business by not having 1 or 2 more people in and just absorbing that overhead. But sorry, I just had a brain fart there. I'm sorry. What was the question again here?
Short-term and long-term plans.
Oh yeah. So short-term, kind of just ride out this whatever's happening right now. make sure that, and the things there are make sure that we're able to provide our clients with the same level of quality and responsiveness that we promise to. And then as we do that, if we see more work coming in, respond to that by hiring more. If we see less work come in, be reactionary to that as well. In the long term, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how big the business can scale because, man, it's gone quick. So I certainly could see us being, a 10 to 15 person civil engineer who's happy with that. I somehow doubt that will be the case, but that may very well be the case. I could also see us very easily going to 50 or 100, who knows? But that's going to require, I don't know what the limit on living in the infill Denver world is versus, and maybe targeting another good infill, market, as you mentioned, franchising, but opening satellite offices, like if we add something, I don't know, like I haven't looked into this at all, like Boise, Idaho, maybe, or something like that, or Montana, that are very, very popular, kind of jumps from Denver, that certainly could be in the cards as well if we found, and I think that's all about finding the right person to spearhead that and understanding that I can't be in two places at once and I need somebody who shares the company vision if that happens. And so I think that it's a lot of organic growth is the way I would view it. Is I don't want to force it. I don't want to just hire 10 people, get a bunch of funding from some outside partner and, really pedal to the metal. I don't think that's the right way to approach it. I think it is grow as the company tells us it's time to grow. Yeah,
that feels about right. I agree. So two last questions here. We're coming up on the half hour. Knowing what you know now, and if you go back in time when you first started Raptor, what is one piece of advice you give your former self?
I would have a lot more confidence in myself, I'll say. I thought when I opened that everyone would think I was like small time, like, oh, Eric's just been doing this 10 years. That's not enough experience to do this. I thought I would ease right into it. And as I mentioned, like I that's connected to like I misjudged how big this was supposed to be from the get-go. And how popular the idea would be. So I would say that that's a really good thing. I also may have read a few more like bookkeeping books or something like that, because that's a huge part of this as well, which I've gotten very good at now. But I'd say like coming out of the gate, I did not know what I was doing from that end. If you'd shown me QuickBooks, I was like, I don't know, like, and now basically a QuickBooks expert. But yeah, that was definitely a baptism. Luckily, I wasn't too busy for the first couple months because like a canceled bank transfer. What do you do with that? Like, you have to find all these, you have to rely on your bookkeeper, but also like having that knowledge yourself is really helpful. So that's probably the other thing I'd jokingly say, like having spent a little bit more time understanding the back end probably would have been a good thing to have.
Yeah. I don't think you need to focus on it, obviously. I mean, we didn't have a bookkeeper for the first couple of years. Then all of a sudden we wanted to go get our first mortgages, and it was like, hey, we need to see your P&Ls, and what is that? So but yeah, having a little bit of backstory and learning there, super helpful.
Yeah, and I'd say also, like, and I know we're up against it, but like that confidence, if you are if you're really good in your industry and you're really good with clients, that there is like the fear of jumping out on your own is something that like you wish you could like show somebody who hasn't done it and is scared of it, like what it really looks like on the other side. Because I think that was another thing that I just had no clue how this thing would manifest, and it was awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Jump right in. Breaststroke confidently. There you go. Yeah. Well, get your house in order, then dive in.
Eric, this has been fantastic. Tell us where can people find and follow you and follow your forms of work?
Yeah, sure. So you can find our website, raptor-civil.com. You can find me, Eric Burtzlaff, on LinkedIn. You can also follow Raptor Civil on LinkedIn. We also have an Instagram account, Raptor. I think it's just Raptor Civil, actually. I think that's all I've got as far as places to find me. But yeah, I'm always open to connections on LinkedIn. Would love to, always open to talking to other like-minded professionals. And really, I mean, especially the small development community and small consultant community is really a bit like a family, and it's like everybody knows everyone. So yeah, it is something that getting to know this industry is awesome. Yeah, truly. Eric, thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate your time. Absolutely.